Welcome to It Takes a Village, presented by Assalone Lombardi, a firm that champions a holistic approach to divorce. Join us as we explore how guidance from the right third-party experts can transform a challenging life event into a journey of empowerment.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of It Takes a Village, presented by Assalone Lombardi. I am Victoria Lombardi, presenting my co-host, Veronica Assalone. Say hi, Veronica. Today, we are so excited because we have our dear friend, Mary Brimer, joining us. Mary is a financial planner, and she is here to talk about all of the fun ways that you can utilize a financial planner during your divorce. Hello, Mary. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're so excited to have you. So I think for a lot of folks, when they're looking at a divorce, they want to be as prepared as possible, and they want to kind of know what all their options are. So, so many people, it is the financial element that brings so much fear and uncertainty. So, how is it that you can really help people when they're looking at a divorce? How are your services so invaluable to them?
Well, they can't get to me soon enough. And oftentimes I'm the one introducing them to the divorce attorney in the first place. And you have to have a strategy around your money. And if a person that's going through divorce hasn't handled money in the past or doesn't know, where the finances are, there's tremendous anxiety on both sides of it, whether it's the person that's the higher income earner or not, and if you have to split property or not, and so the anxiety tends to paralyze people into doing nothing but just stressing out over it. And so a lot of what we do is help people really get a pulse on what their situation is, and help really therapeutically talk through what the situation might look like and just kind of help keep them calm. So it's like talk Xanax during a very stressful moment in time, because things can change. And what I do notice is that people tend to talk a lot about their situation because that is, it's all around them, and it's on their mind 24 hours a day. And oftentimes the input, feedback, advice that they're receiving from the average layperson is like 100% incorrect, but they tend to take it as gospel because this person went through a divorce and this is what happened, so they automatically assume that applies
My
to them.
brother's cousin's girlfriend's sister, my girlfriend's aunt said.
And it tends to it pours fuel all over a fire that doesn't need to be there. So I'm super big on privacy and making sure that we're providing a safe place for people to come to with these types of concerns, because it's extremely unnerving. It's very scary to think that, if you've invested in your education and you're thinking now you're suddenly going to pay alimony, or you inherited money and put it into a house and now you got to split your equity. And there's a lot of emotional feelings that go with money. Money's like 80% of all stress. And I would say you ladies probably know that one of the top reasons people start to file for divorce is because money is stressing the situation. We're not on the same page. Right, there's financial infidelity, whatever.
Well, and you've already kind of touched on a big piece that we're going to talk today, which is when should people get you engaged, right? So obviously money being a biggest factor in most people's lives and in their divorces, you serve to be such a powerful tool to them. And you said the sooner the better, but we've kind of talked about that there's really 3 key phases that you can get involved, right? It is before a divorce when they're anticipating or planning. It's during a divorce if we're litigating or doing analyst, and it's post-divorce for long-term planning strategies so they continue to have success with the money that they do keep. And so I think if it's okay with you, we'd love to take those one at a time today.
Sure. I would say as soon as possible, as soon as you think you might need to get divorced, it's a good time to start quietly, figuring out what you have and where it's at. And ultimately,
is this the new quiet quitting? It's going to be quiet divorcing.
Quiet divorcing. Quietly start figuring out where the money is. I can't stress how important that is. Figure out how much it costs, your lifestyle is costing, and start thinking about that, and come have a quiet conversation. So I just want to put it out there. There's a lot of anxiety around seeking help from financial advisors that there's going to be this big bill and they don't have the money to pay for it. And all I'm going to say is that you can't afford to not make the time to come in and talk. So you come in for a consultation. The advice that we give you right out the door, just in the first 60, 90 minutes, is going to be very invaluable to you. And generally, the first consultation's free. Then we figure out how we might work together going forward. Generally, I'm sure you advise clients not to move much money around going into a divorce. Court doesn't like that. You have to start explaining things. So, we're very sensitive to that, but it's making a plan for the assets and thinking in terms of it's compromise. That would be the middle part of, the before part is assessing where you're at and what you need to live on. And then I'm able to help relay that over in terms of what assets the marriage has together, because your marriage is a legally, financially recognized business with the government, aka the tax IRS. So to help relay how those investment vehicles are, how we can devise them equitably, and equal is not equitable. Certain investments are more taxable than others. Certain things are more liquid. So how can we sometimes creatively dissolve different assets in ways that people don't think about? They just think, I want half or more than half, and that might be true, but it costs money to fight over things. And sometimes we can compromise and give and take and make things work in a number of ways. The during part is more of just reminding people that their financial life is going to change when this comes to an end, and you don't just get to go take the money and do whatever you want with it the day that the divorce is final. There's a whole process.
Well, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but you bring up a good point about people should be quietly coming to these meetings prepared, right? And I
Absolutely.
know Veronica and I, we probably have a million stories of spouses that come in the door that they're going, I have no idea what I have. I have no
Mhm.
idea what my spouse has. There's a locked filing
I have
cabinet,
no
or
idea
it's all
what I
digital.
spend on a monthly basis and what
Oh,
my needs are,
that's
right?
I had one lady tell me, and this wasn't post divorce, but it was post death. Was, well, I need $8,000 a month, and I'm like, but you were living on less than 20,000 a year, and that's
Yeah.
a lot of money. We're gonna go broke quick. So, but it's, we have tools and resources that we can share, worksheets where people can help figure it out, and it's a good time to quietly figure out what you have in the marriage, because a lot of statements are delivered electronically. So tax time is a great time of year to get your finger on the pulse of what's going on, or do a little bit of tax planning. Is like, hey, what do we have here? What do we have there? To check in on those accounts. You won't have immediate access to a spouse's 401k, or if they have brokerage accounts, you won't have access to that. IRAs, people tend to leave jobs frequently and collect those types of accounts. So generally in marriages now, there's, yours, mine, and ours. And if somebody has delegated financial decision making off and management off to the other spouse, they're really lost. And so we can help them figure out what they have.
So, Mary,
Well, and go ahead. I think you're asking the same question I am, but go ahead.
I was just going to highlight our personal experience that we've had with you so positively with clients just like that we've mentioned, in terms of meeting with you before a divorce. If a client, for example, a spouse who's never had their hand on finances, meeting with you early and often to understand what they need to be receiving in terms of information that we call discovery in a divorce, in order to understand really what their financial picture is. It's an invaluable time for people to meet with a financial planner when they're approaching divorce. And in the middle, we have loved a relationship with you on behalf of our clients for two reasons. Either that you're also assisting them with reality testing them about what assets are best for them to be seeking in division and a divorce, and or as an expert to speak at a higher level than Victoria and I can on different asset classes. For example, stock options that are so confusing, or why there are apples and oranges in terms of assets. Your house might have some sort of emotional value to you, but could be an enormous expense, versus more liquid assets or more practical assets, and being able to have those very practical conversations with clients throughout the divorce process that help them to make good decisions instead of perhaps emotional decisions or decisions that don't serve them ultimately. Are the
Well,
two out of the three phases where we see you getting involved with our clients. The third being post divorce, when they now have to go live their single lives and manage their assets wisely in a way so that they can afford their lives, right?
right. Well, and the during part is a great time to do some education, some self education. There's some great books that I can recommend, but to do some financial coaching and figuring out, like you had said, kind of means testing what they can handle, and that's where I would say procrastination leads to failure later on. Is that the most powerful tool that you have in investing is time. And oftentimes people underestimate how much time they have. Time flies by before you know it. So, alimony, if it's rehabilitative, it goes away faster. People haven't gotten themselves back into the job market or haven't gone and tried to get a higher paying job. Hanging on to a house that's too expensive, and you can have all the emotions attached to it. But, and a lot of people will say they want to stay in a house until the kids graduate, and we get that. But there has to be some movement towards those things happening, because it doesn't selling a house doesn't happen overnight. Packing up an entire house and leaving it doesn't happen overnight. Figuring out where you're going to live, especially if kids are still in a school district and you're trying to not uproot them because they're of older ages, there's just a lot to take into it, into thinking about and planning. So a lot of, again, we do a lot of talk therapy. The growing money is not the challenge. It's the behavioral aspect and psychological aspect of money, so that we approach it, sort of the same way that we approach oxygen and water and food in our lives. Is that it's very important to have that organized and have a plan around it, because once the time is gone and the money's gone, you can't get it back. There's a lot of regret that goes on the other side of inaction. And so I look at my role as being here to help people prepare and gently nudge them along the way.
Be proactive.
Well, and we use the phrase a lot, and we've kind of said it here, and I know Veronica and you and I use it a lot with our clients of quietly getting our hands on these things, or getting in front of before a spouse finds out, and kind of having that war plan in session, right? How does a spouse go about contacting you, getting that information, and doing all that quietly without setting off alarm bells and things like that? And if it does, how much does it affect the effectiveness of
I
the
would say
plan?
it's actually pretty easy. The very first place I would start is I would start with the CPA, and I would ask for a copy of last year's tax return. Get it in an email, right? You don't even need to go pick it up or get a paper copy. That tax return is going to be full of information of all assets that were generating taxes. It might not have a listing of all of the IRAs if there's miscellaneous retirement accounts around, but it's certainly going to give a picture, if there are taxable accounts, brokerage accounts, savings accounts, stock options, things like other sources of income that are coming in. If you do a budget and then you realize that the income that's being reported for the two of you is substantially higher than what your budget is, that's a good indicator that there's other money around. So you can start asking questions: where did it go? and so the tax return really tells a story. That's all it is. It tells a
Right.
story of the previous year. And if you're filing jointly, even if you're filing separately, you really are entitled to get a copy of it. Otherwise, you can go to the IRS and request a transcript, but you would do that in discovery.
So what you're saying is if somebody is looking before a divorce has started, step number one, get a tax return
Mhm.
and get to your office.
Yep, exactly. Get a tax
Beautiful.
return. You can't hide.
So now, right, can't hide from the government. Well,
Yeah.
especially now where we're supposed to disclose any money we make through criminal activities or robbery or anything like that. But so let's talk about now what happens in a divorce, right? How are you serving in a divorce? I know we've kind of started to weigh into that, but I think that's where you probably see Veronica and I the most
Right.
when we are hotly contested and ready to roll.
That's usually when I do a good inventory and prepare a nice report and send it back over to the attorneys, and sometimes that ends up in court or not. But it's looking thoughtfully, professionally, and without emotion at what the different assets are, and how we can creatively divide them with the least amount of hassle, time, expense. There are certain things that are not easily divided, like houses. That's difficult. Um, it's, if you're going to divide IRAs, if there's multiple IRAs, we don't need to split every single one of them in half, because it costs you money and it costs you a lot of time. People don't realize that there's a whole the quadro, the qualified domestic relation order after your divorce. Then you got to go petition the court with another document, get that approved. Then you got to go to the investment company. So literally, you can walk out of family court and go celebrate your divorce, and it will still be a minimum of 90 to 180 days before you actually can get your hands on that retirement account. So if you're making decisions for your life, you're living, where you're going to live, you're going to go buy a car, whatever it is. If you think that you're utilizing IRA money from a spouse to get it, you're going. I'm trying to avoid people coming up with disappointment, which adds more stress and more emotion around it. Because as quickly as we can work past the emotion around the money part and start building a plan for a independent financial life, the more successful people are going to be, and have a plan and set some goals of, and then celebrate. Like, that's the bigger part, is how do we celebrate these little wins? You want to celebrate being divorced. You want to celebrate filing your first tax return with yourself, your own social security number to, it's a new beginning, and it's something worth celebrating. Getting more money, all of those things, we want to celebrate those too along the way. So I'm not the person that says you can't spend money, but I do warn you not to, give it away and not to celebrate too hard.
And I want to add to that although you may be assisting one party in divorce, in working with you, I have found that even though the other party may see you as an adversary because you're working with their wife or you're working with their husband, that my experience is, whether they perceive you that way or not, you truly are more of a facilitator. Because even if you're working with the wife, you're talking to the wife about reality and reality testing, and you're helping to move both parties through the process with decision making on how to practically divide the assets. That's certainly best for
Like rental properties.
Right.
Like rental properties are a big one, where there's a lot of emotion, and the reality is, can a spouse, do they have the resources, and let alone the skills of managing a property? Do they have the resources, and understanding some of these things, if they're in an LLC, unrolling all of that? There's a lot that goes into it, and we have to sit back and have an honest discussion. And each person's uniquely different. Some people can totally deal with it, and others don't. I don't have the temperament to be a property manager. I just don't. I know that about myself. My partner doesn't have the temperament for it. We are not landlords. We're not property managers, because we take care of our stuff and we don't want to give up our limited free time. But it's expensive, and it can also benefit people. It is one of the fastest ways to multiply wealth, is having rental real estate. So we want to really figure that out, and kind of time things, just present options for people. It's more of, it's setting the right expectation, though, because
Well, it sounds like it's not just a one size fits all plan, right? You're not saying everybody that sits down in your office, go get rental properties, go do
oh
this.
god, no,
It's
no.
what's reasonable and realistic based on them.
Right.
You have a very straightforward, practical style, and you're constantly testing the reality so that they're much better on the other side, understanding what assets they should be seeking in a divorce that's best for them for the long term. They come
I
with
would say helping people have acceptance. So, like, giving them acceptance and approval is hitting that reality check and filtering through some questions, right? The reality check questions, and then saying, okay, so we're going to give you permission to say, this isn't for me, and now, so what's our plan B or our plan C, so that most people don't spend very much time at all thinking about their money, organizing it. If I asked anybody what their net worth is, they'd have to stop and think about it for a minute. They haven't organized it. They haven't put their debts to it. One of the biggest things I will say that I try to help my clients prepare for is, when you go through a divorce, you need to be thinking how quickly you can get in front of a bank and apply for a mortgage. And if you don't have income for 2 solid years, and you have decreasing alimony, and you have children that are accelerating out of child support, you need to be credit worthy of walking into a bank, because that's the way that you build wealth, is you use somebody else's money. You save systematically, but you also borrow money cheaply and leverage those investments. And people underestimate their ability. Yeah, all right, I got $1 million in a divorce, but the bank's not going to lend you $100 because you have no income.
Right.
It just so I want everybody to be credit worthy as quickly as possible, and we go through that paying off debt, making a plan, paying the bills, and just really having a plan going forward, and reviewing that on an annual basis. And it's not expensive to work with us. There's a number of ways that financial advisors get paid. So I find a lot of people don't make the time to come in because they're afraid they're going to get hit with some big bill, right? And that's one piece of anxiety. But you know what? Marriage and dissolving a marriage, again, it's a legally recognized business partnership, and in the eyes of the government, that costs money to undo. And so, when you come in to seek advice from a planner, we can be compensated in a number of ways, whether it's fees, whether it's commission based, whether it's the person just wants to consult and pay an annual check for that if they're comfortable with that, and support somebody doing it themselves. They just want to check in and, kind of like a 50,000-mile tune up. How am I doing? What do you think? Am I on the right path? Just to kind of cut out the noise and get an unbiased professional opinion, right? Like if you're having a pain, you don't go consult your friend for the advice. You go to a physician, I hope, after you get done going to WebMD and getting scared. If you try,
get scared.
And on that vein, if you try to Google a question on finance, you're going to be overwhelmed on the internet, and you're still going to end up having questions, probably more questions than you started with.
And I think that leads to too is, what is your duty to these clients, right? Are you a fiduciary for them, whereas Reddit is just keyboard warriors?
Right.
How do you help to defend them in that very clear sense?
Yeah, I'm a fiduciary for them.
And what does that mean for people that don't know?
What that means is the advice I give you has to be in your best interest, not mine, not for commission, not for, fame and popularity or social media, stature, not being an influencer. It's for what is in the client's best interest.
And that brings us to the other hat that we see you wear so well, which is post-divorce. There are a lot of folks that we represent who have never managed a checkbook, who come into considerable assets, again, who don't have a good understanding about the asset classes that they now possess and how they should manage those for
taxes,
long-term taxes.
They don't calculate
long-term,
taxes,
right?
Yeah.
And we also see you wear that hat so well of remaining a financial planner for those people who really, really do need planning, long-term planning, to make sure that they remain fiscally healthy and stable. For example, high asset divorces where wives, again, have never known what their worth was or what their estate was worth, who have perhaps they're in a position to almost be at retirement age. They're likely not going to re-enter the workforce, and how do they make those assets work best for them for the long term? We also see you do that so well, and know that we are leaving those types of clients with that demographic in competent and hands where they're going to be okay, probably happier than they've been in a long time on the other side of their divorce.
Time is really of the essence on a lot of this stuff, and sometimes people have been, before they get divorced, the spouse that's going to come into, typically the spouse that doesn't know what they have is about to come into, let's call it a windfall, but a windfall to them, and they might underestimate how much time it's going to be before they can actually get their hands on it. So that's something that we do very well, is getting those quadros through the court, and then working with the investment companies, because the forms themselves are as overwhelming as a tax return to most people. So that's where they really want to come in and get some assistance on that, because if the boxes are not checked correctly, the fields are not populated, it will be rejected. And they generally want certified copies of court documents. So we know how to do it, and we do it very quickly. Everything is done by Federal Express and tracked, and we get a person's name, and we're recording all of that, and then helping people just make intelligent choices with their money, and reminding them that So I find a scarcity mindset often where they come into a good chunk of money, they think it's not going to last, and generally it will if you're smart with it. And so otherwise the court wouldn't have let you walk out the door, being a victim. And so
Right. Well, I think it's the reality for so many folks, right? Of like, it's one thing to get it in hand, but then once it's in hand,
what do you do?
what do you do
Well,
with
I mean,
this?
if this was prior to 18 months ago, people would be parking it in a bank at 0% interest. Now you have options, right? So there's a lot of different ways. But the big piece that I see though is you have to have a plan for yourself first, because people tend to celebrate a little too hard and be a little too generous when they're first managing money for the first couple of years, where there is regret on the other side of it. Loaning money to friends and family and not being repaid. Particularly adult children, being overly generous where it's not helpful to them because you're interrupting their learning curve, and how to really mature. And so we want to avoid that regret piece because it brings in depression. There's a lot of shame that comes with money. It has so many different, dynamics, so many different emotions, right? And how you want to avoid all the messy stuff with it and enjoy what it can do for you. And however we can best support that, whether it's through education, recommending good books, recommending good workshops, working one-on-one, all of those things, we just want to best support people, so they don't have to think about it. They just delegate the worrying to us.
Well, and I think other big pieces is how do you make it palatable for people? Like, it's a great, in theory, to sit down and read a financial planning book so you can understand the importance of your financial future. That makes me want to shoot myself in the face.
Yeah, no,
respectfully. So how do you make it so you have buy-in from your
Right.
clients and they want to engage and they
I
feel the
I
importance
only
of this?
recommend appropriate reading material that's in layman's terms that is easy to digest. Small, and sometimes it's just small parts of it. But there are some really great books out there that I would say empower and inspire and motivate people differently. Very, very easy reads, but I tend to meet people where they are. I want to meet people where they are and not talk over their head. And that's where a lot of people go, is that the financial world is full of so much jargon. It's like the legal world. People just, their eyes glaze over. And I've had people look at me and say, can you just tell me what I'm supposed to do? And that's okay. I want to make sure you understand what the plan is and what you're owning. But beyond that is, we're going to look out for you. And that's really what it is are you getting somebody where you walk out of the office and you feel confident that they have your best interest at heart and that they are going to do the best thing by you. And we do in our firm.
I can attest to that.
Right, give them a partner.
I can attest to that. Mary, if somebody is contemplating divorce and or is in the middle of divorce and needs your handholding and help and analysis and or has recently been divorced and has no idea what they're doing with their money to make it grow while they're sleeping and last a lot longer than it could, how should they get in touch with you?
They can go to my website, www.gingergreenfinancial.com. Ginger like the root, green like the color, and financial.com. You can email me, mary@gingergreenfinancial.com, or you can call in 401-295-1005.
And Mary, the people will be dying to know, is it ginger green because of your
and her
hair?
beautiful
ginger
eyes
for the hair, and it's green for the money. I do have green eyes, but it's green for the money because we like money, and financial because that's obvious.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you for having me,
Yes,
ladies.
Mary, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
today.
for all you do for our clients.
It's always a pleasure to see you.
My pleasure.
Beautiful. And that's it for today, folks. Thank you so much for joining us for this installment of It Takes a Village, and we will see you next time.